Thanks for tuning in to Local SEO today. Don't forget to subscribe and share this episode. My guest today is Erin Blaskie. She started her first online business in 2004. She has spoken at TEDx and is currently the director of marketing at Fellow.app, a productivity tool for managers. Thanks for joining me today, Erin.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I'm excited.
Yeah, well, share, if you don't mind sharing with the audience member a little bit about your journey, how you got started, and where you are today.
Yeah, okay. So let's go back to 1987 or 1988. I promise I won't actually recount every year. However, that year is really monumental for me and my journey because when I was about 6 years old, my dad actually gave me a Commodore 64. And
Oh,
for
nice.
those, yeah, for anyone who doesn't know what a Commodore 64 is, it's funny, I do a lot of talks, and sometimes if I'm talking to the younger generations, no one knows what the Commodore 64 is. However, it's a computer, and my dad brought this computer home, and I grew up not having a whole lot. So the fact that we had this computer coming into the house was a really big deal. And I remember when I received this computer, my mind was just so, expanded, and the possibilities that I saw for the world and through tech were just so incredible. And my sister, who's younger than I am, my sister and I would often play Office, and I would be the CEO, and she'd be my secretary. And this computer just, again, unlocked so many things. And the reason that piece of is so important in my journey is that when I look back, on all the years that I've had, and I will quickly summarize those years for you, but when I look back on all of those years, if I think about the thing that was probably the most pivotal to the journey and to getting me on the path that I ultimately walked on, it really was my dad bringing that computer into the house. And I was really lucky. My dad loved building computers. He loved technology. So we always had computers in the home. We got internet right away before any of my friends had it. And even when we got internet, I remember having access to this thing that felt so vast and expansive. And I remember getting on sites like LiveJournal and Open Diary and GeoCities, and I was building websites, and I was blogging back in the day. I use air quotes on blogging because it wasn't what it looks like today. But it was just this trend that continued. And so when I was about 21, I had went to school for a very short time. I went and did a year, realized that I didn't really want to spend a whole lot of time in school. I really wanted to just like hit the ground running and work. And so I ended up leaving school after the first year. I went and took an accelerated program just to get a piece of paper. And then I got to work. So I started working in like normal companies. I say normal companies, meaning the opposite of my own, starting my own venture. And I did that for maybe about 18 months
Okay.
before I realized that I was really, really curious and fascinated with the idea of starting my own company. So I did that in 2004.
Oh,
I,
wow.
yeah, I started one of Canada's first virtual assistance businesses
Mm.
back then. Uh, Really focused on broad services, but over the course of time realized that marketing was probably like the thing I was the most passionate about and the best at. So I doubled down on that and then spent the next 13 years delivering marketing services before taking a full-time job again. So I actually went the opposite way from most people. And yeah, two jobs later, landed at Fellow, and I'm now their first head of marketing, and really loving the transition. So I'm leaving it as a summary, John, so we can kind of go into like whatever levels of detail you'd like on any of
Wow.
those
I'm so curious
things.
because for me, it's more about, okay, 18 months of working, real
Yes.
job. And then what triggered you? Like, was it because you were dictated by tasks, going to work at a strict time? Like, what gave you the mindset of really moving ahead and trying to do your own thing?
Yeah. So I was actually always very entrepreneurial. So because I had grown up like not having a lot, I realized that if I wanted to have certain things in my life, like, when I was in high school, if I wanted to have things like designer clothes, like, when I say designer, I mean like the Gap, compared to, let's say,
Levi's, yeah.
yeah, or clothes from somewhere else. I realized that I needed to work for it. And my parents, bless their hearts, because this was one of the best things I think they've ever done for me. They really taught me the value of work, and they taught me the value of, if you put the time in, you put the effort in, and you really show up, you're going to get the rewards of that. And so I was always really curious about making money, and I was always interested in figuring out ways that I could do that. So even in college, as an example, I had a job selling roses at a bar, which doesn't sound very, like an interesting job, maybe. However, what was neat about it was I would show up to this bar and they would have 24 roses, and I would have to go on the floor and sell them. And basically sell, usually men on buying the rose for their partner. And what it taught me, though, I know that because it sounds like a silly example, but what it taught me was that, I could take something that was presented in front of me, like this idea of selling roses, and I could turn it into a profit center quite easily if I just thought about it differently. And so for me, in that moment, I actually realized that if I had the roses purchased for me, I could then hit the floor again and resell them at the end for pure profit. And so I was always thinking about things in that way. And then when I got into my first job, I had a female CEO, and she was such an encouraging example for me of someone who had this idea and just went and did it. And so because I had had all these little entrepreneurial moments, and I have so many more, I use the roses example, but like there's so many more. Because I had all these entrepreneurial moments leading up to having that female CEO, I think it was just the catalyst I needed to realize, I could do that too. I could start my own business. And I didn't want to have to be necessarily tied in to a specific organization and doing a very specific job. I wanted the creativity and the flexibility and the freedom, that I assumed came with entrepreneurship. And I say assumed because, yeah, it's not always that way.
So let's talk about this entrepreneurial journey. So right off the
Mm-hmm.
beginning, back in 2004, take us through how your first couple years went.
Yeah, so in 2004, I remember it clearly. I was sitting in my office in this real job, and I had this thought that if I was teaching as well at the time. I was teaching a business administration program. And I thought to myself, you know, I wonder if anyone is providing administrative assistant services, but virtually, leveraging the internet. And so I did a quick Google search. I don't remember if it was Google at the time, but anyway, I did a quick search online to see if anyone had done online administrative assistance. And that's when I came across a website of a person that was doing this already in the US, but there wasn't anyone really servicing the Canadian market yet. So because I had all the experience in the past building these GeoCities websites, I said to myself, you know what? I could build a website. I can put this business together. I applied, for my business license, got that, put the website together, came up with an initial set of services, and then I put all of that online. And then I hustled pretty hard using sites like Elance, which is now Upwork, and other bidding sites for jobs. And I just bid on a whole bunch of projects. And I got pretty lucky. In the first 2 weeks of doing that, I ended up landing a client out of Silicon Valley who was growing a company down there. He was an internet marketer, which is what we called them well before digital marketing. He was an internet marketer, and he was fascinating to me because he was the same age as I was. And he hired me. And then within a short period of time, 6 months, let's say, I had enough referrals and enough new clients to be able to match my income that I was making in my job. So I quit. I quit my job. I came home and started working full time in my company, and didn't look back after that. So the first little while was really about, I think, hustle, and it was about every day waking up and thinking to myself, how can I get more people to know who I am? Because if more people know who I am, it goes without saying that I'll probably get more business. And I just really hustled hard in those first few, like 6 months. And then the rest was just an emotional roller coaster through servicing clients for 14 years.
So did you eventually scale outwards? Did you hire people within? How did you grow and eventually dissolve the company?
Yeah, so I did a lot on my own for quite some time. So that looked like me, providing services one on one, and what ended up happening was I would get specific clients that had a lot of different needs, and so oftentimes they might hire me initially for, let's say, a marketing project or to manage their marketing campaigns on an ongoing basis. But then it would be, they would say, Erin, I really want my website designed, or Erin, I really would
Mm,
like these graphics done. And when I started getting those requests for things that fell outside of my own skill set, I started subcontracting some of that work out to other freelancers and
yeah.
other agencies. And that allowed me to grow the team and, quote unquote team. It allowed me to grow the services base without actually having to hire employees because no one person was working full time in the company. They were just bringing their expertise to a project and then leaving when it was done. So I think at the peak I had 25 different subcontractors and freelancers and agencies and that I was working with, as well as 75 active clients at a time. That was probably when I got to the place where I felt it was the most complex from a management perspective. And and we can talk about this, also realized that bigger is not always better when it comes to, especially when it comes to services. And I, after a period of burnout and depression within like very serious entrepreneur burnout, I quickly realized that the size of the company and the model and the way that I had structured it was definitely not ideal. So I actually went back to having only 6 clients on retainer, and I worked with them much more closely. So yeah, sort of went from solo to much broader to back to almost solo. Yeah.
I love hearing that because that's the true journey of an entrepreneur because everyone imagines and wants to scale, grow
Yes.
it from, 5 digits to 6 digits to recurring to have amazing clients. But then you're gonna realize like, are they your type of people you ultimately want to work with? Do they resonate
Mhm.
with you? Do they have the same values? And why are
Yeah,
you doing this in the first place, right? So
exactly.
so figuring that out has to be self-realization, right? And again, I've only been running my business for 7 years as an
Yeah.
agency, but very similar. I started with hiring people on Upwork, and
Yep.
I had the opportunity to grow, make
Mhm.
mistakes, continue growing, make more mistakes, but really implement systems and
Mhm.
processes and figure out how to streamline things so
Yes.
that you can do things so that you're working on your business as opposed to constantly running into the business, right? Uh,
Yeah, 100%. And you asked the question about, and I forgot to answer it. You asked the question as well about how I dissolved the company. Um, I think that's an important thing to tack on to this piece of the conversation, because I think a lot of people, when they start a business and they're inside of a business and they do that for a really long time, uh, oftentimes we often wrap our identity so closely around this idea of being an entrepreneur, and that we can't possibly like ever think about doing anything else because, oh my gosh, that's going to look like I was, that I'm not as entrepreneurial as I thought. But what I realized in going from owning a business to back into the working world is that entrepreneurship and entrepreneur, like being entrepreneurial, is not what you're doing. It's really your mindset. And for me, where I got to with the business, in the end, when I restructured the whole business and I was working with fewer clients, and I was doing things on a retainer model, and it was much smoother. It was easy. However, I was still doing it all alone in many ways. And, I was owning 100% of the risk. I was owning 100% of the client satisfaction. And, I was often feeling like I just really wanted that team around me, that, the in-person experience of going to an office. Like I hadn't had that since I was 21. And, I really just wanted to share in that. So for me, the decision to get out of my agency was actually really easy, because I was still working with one subcontractor whom was a woman that I'd known for years, since I was 16 years old. And I essentially just said to her, you have the relationships now with all of my clients. Do you want to just continue working with these people? Like, I don't want anything from it. The business served me well while I had it. I just want the people that are in the company to be taken care of. So if you can just like carry the torch and keep going, amazing. And because for me, it was just time. It was time to like go do something different, go deeper in one thing versus being spread across so many different companies and clients. And yeah, I think it's just important to recognize sometimes that, it's not necessarily always what you're doing, but how you're doing it and the mindset you have around it, that matters the most.
That's amazing, man. I love hearing that whole story because end of the day, everyone who's starting a business as an entrepreneur, they have this nugget. They have this dream of
Mm-hmm.
like eventually growing it to 100 employees, X amount of millions, eventually selling it and then living on an island with a
Yep.
yacht, right? Like
Yep.
these are all the things like the Amazons and Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, or whatever. Everyone has that dream, that
Yes.
visualization. But then reality hits. You
Mm-hmm.
got to still live, right? You still
Yeah.
need to take care of if you have family, if you have obligations like home, food,
Mm-hmm.
shelter, your parents, friends that you want to stay in close contact with, like
Yeah.
things that are really important, right? And
Yeah.
then
Yep.
it's lifestyle choices, right? Like entrepreneurship is not for everyone. It's a
Mm-hmm.
very lonely journey. And that's why I love podcasting. I get to meet other
Yeah.
entrepreneurs that have gone through different paths and then
Mm-hmm.
either gone back to the corporate world or they enjoy it. They're taking
Yep.
on other challenges, right? Um,
Yep.
but it's finding what's right for you
Yes.
ultimately because everyone
Yeah.
has their own story, journey, life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have to figure that out yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
that's self-realization, right? And understanding what is your happy place. Where do you,
Yeah. 100%.
and if you don't find it, like go out and figure out what that is. It could
Yeah.
be just working at a
Yes.
company and you love the social environment, the tasks,
Mm-hmm.
and that's fine.
Yep.
That's your happy place.
Yep.
Entrepreneurship is not for everyone, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's really important, as well, just to stress that, like, to what I was saying earlier, that entrepreneurship also has many forms too, right? Like, I think oftentimes we think that entrepreneurs are the of course there's a definition of entrepreneurs. Like, yes, when you look it up in the dictionary, there is a definition of an entrepreneur. But I also do think that there are so many people who are working inside of companies that still have that, insane entrepreneur mindset that requires, you to, or it pushes you to do certain things in a different way or think about things differently. And I think those people inside of companies are so powerful as well. So I think the world needs both, right? You need the entrepreneurs that are out there building the thing and growing it, and or the ones that are, they have the thing and it's a lifestyle business, but it's still great and it's serving them. And then you have the people like me who go back into the work world, but I don't treat my job like a 9 to 5 job. Like, I am in there. I feel like I own and embody Fellow as though it were my own. And and I think the world takes all kinds. And so I think it's yeah, I think it's really neat, and journeys are definitely not linear.
Oh man, that's awesome. So during
Ever.
this path,
Yeah.
from doing your business for 14 years, did you
Hmm.
have like mentors or coaches or people that you looked up to along the way, or was it kind of solopreneur on your end?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely had mentors, through people like my clients. Oftentimes I was working with people who were much like further ahead than I was in terms of their own entrepreneurial journey. That founder that I was telling you about, my first client, he ended up creating a business and I worked with him through the whole time. He created a company that ended up being a quite a successful company in the Valley, and ended up getting acquired by ancestry.com.
Mm.
It was a huge acquisition, such an incredible experience to be a part of, just in terms of going through that whole journey with him. But someone like him is a is a perfect mentor when I think back on everything he taught me about internet marketing and then online marketing and then digital marketing, which is honestly all the same, just the tools change. But someone like him was an incredible mentor. The CEO that I worked for, the female CEO, prior to starting my company, an incredible mentor for me. So I think I've always had them around, circling around. What I think I didn't do well enough, and this would be something I would tell anyone who is maybe just starting on their journey or who's in their journey and maybe not leveraging this enough, I didn't formalize the process enough. And what I mean by that is, yes, I had all these people around me and I was, looking at them and learning and observing. Yes, I was reading books and yes, I even had a podcast way back when podcasts weren't even cool. I was doing all these things. So I was inundated with information and experience and everything else, but I didn't formalize it with anyone. And so I think where I missed out on that was I didn't have that one person or maybe a few people who were championing me, week to week, holding me up on the really tough, in the tough moments, and making sure that I was circumventing maybe some of the errors that, they themselves have made. Uh, and I think I missed out on that piece of it in terms
Yeah.
of just formalizing the process.
Yeah, I think the accountability partner, and even
Yes.
if there's someone on your team, let it be, a colleague or your staff or someone that you look up to, a friend maybe, right?
Yeah.
Just hold you accountable throughout the entire process would have helped. And I feel a lot of business owners feel they can do everything themselves,
Yes. Yes.
right? And I'm the same way. I feel
Yeah.
like a lot of people, whoever says stuff, I'm like, great,
Yeah.
it's my opinion. I could do it my way, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, you just have to take a step back and really listen and
Yeah.
want to open up about the challenges. Because a lot of people, you're probably putting up a front. A lot of business owners,
Mm-hmm.
they're stressed. They're probably not financially sound. It looks a lot bigger and successful than it really is, but no
Mm-hmm.
one knows their story. No one knows
No.
what's going on behind the scenes. Are they having family problems or
Yeah.
different stresses? Like no one really knows, right? So
Yeah.
having someone to really just lay a strong foundation and really just help you, guide you throughout that whole process definitely
Mm-hmm.
would be impactful. I
Yeah, it's exhausting being an entrepreneur sometimes, right? Having to put that whole facade on all the time is exhausting. And I wrote an article on Medium about this shortly after my own experience with entrepreneurial burnout. And I wrote how, we look at entrepreneurs as though they are the heroes of our stories. Like they are the heroes in the business world. They are the ones that are putting the cape on and they have to be confident and strong and wise and all of these things. But at the end of the day, they're people. Like they are actual human beings. And they're making just as many mistakes. They're waking up just as many days having no idea what to do. However, especially when they're servicing customers or clients, they have to look like they know what they're doing because otherwise it makes it harder, at least in the way that we've been taught. It makes it harder for people to trust you enough to pay you if they don't think you're confident or if they don't think you can do the job or if they don't think blah blah blah. And that is such a messed up place that we've got ourselves in because it then eliminates the ability for us to have these conversations that are so much more real. Like I tried to do it all just like you described when I had my business, and that led me to getting a $45,000 tax bill that I was not expecting. And, quickly realized like, wow, I need an accountant, like these things happen, yet we pretend like we pretend like they don't. And we pretend like, or we think that if I was to be honest about that it makes me look, naive, it makes me look maybe a little stupid, it makes me look unprepared or disorganized. That's not true. It's just like part of it. It's all part of it. And I think like the more we can shed away some of those, things that we carry in these like facades, like I think the world would be such a better place for it. So
I totally agree. And I love that you bring it up because a lot of people are hiding behind the screen, right? And
Yes.
if you look at Instagram or social media, everyone's chasing likes, follows, comments, shares. Everyone wants to, like whoever it is, Beyonce or some, celebrity, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have millions of followers. Great, good for them, right?
Yeah.
But in order for like everyone wants to look up to them, but they don't really know what's going on in their lives. They could be
Mm,
depressed. They could be,
yeah,
yeah, they could be successful. What does success really mean? Ultimately,
exactly.
you have to define it for your own purpose as well as like other people. And they
Yeah.
have success, it's different for everyone.
Mm, yeah.
Um, and so like being grounded, being authentic, being raw, being just true to yourself. Like I was very fortunate to continue doing what I love doing, but
Yeah.
have people that actually are so honest with me because they're telling me the
That's
truth.
good.
They're telling me how it is.
Yeah.
And I love that feedback. I love the honesty because at least I know when I'm pushing them too hard, when I'm going too hard in terms of like just sales or
Mm-hmm.
deliverables or whatever. But then it comes makes me realize how grateful I am to have
Mm-hmm.
people that are honest, that are
Yes.
genuine, that stick with me even though because they know me now,
Yeah.
how I react or how I don't react. And it's more about like just surrounding yourself with like-minded individuals that you really really trust, and they trust your
100%.
judgment. And without that, you won't have a really really good sustainable business, right?
No, and I think it's worth saying as well that you can't also surround yourself with people who are just your hype machines.
Yes.
It's important. It's really important to have the people who will celebrate your accomplishments, tell you how amazing you are, you know, like really fill up your sales. Like you want that, like 100% you want that. However, you also need to have a few people that you deeply trust who will also call you on the things that like you're not aware of, right? You want them to be able to expose some of your blind spots, like the things that you're not even maybe paying attention to. And I see this all the time. Recently there was an experience. I won't go into great detail because there's no point, but there is value in the story. So there was an entrepreneur recently that I had seen out in the wild, and I realized that the majority of the focus of his efforts, whether it was like anything media that he was doing, or things he was sharing on social, or whatever the case might be, was all people that looked just like him, and looked like him, talked like him, acted like him, all the things. And I realized in that moment that like maybe he had a blind spot, like maybe he didn't actually realize that how homogenous his entire thing was. And so I sent a note over, and I was like, hey, maybe you might want to consider having some people on who look a little different, and can bring a different experience to the table. And and thankfully he was very receptive to it and very open to it, because sometimes we may not even realize that these things are
Exactly.
happening. Other times I'm sure they are done somewhat intentionally, but I do think having people who are willing to call you on your BS, and who are willing to show you your blind spots in particular is so valuable. So valuable.
Yeah, as a business owner, you think you got everything under control, or you
Yeah.
think you know everything, and that's definitely not the case. I
No.
realize my strengths, my weaknesses, and I let others take care of that. Delegate accordingly.
Yes.
Let them own it. Let them make mistakes. Hopefully, they
Hmm.
don't make as many.
Yeah, yeah, or at least
But
not very tragic ones.
yeah, but that's how they evolve. That's how they get
Yeah.
better. That's how they learn, right? It's like myself. I make
Yes.
mistakes daily too. It's okay.
Yeah, everybody does. Everyone does. I think the sooner we can all realize that we're all human, the
Exactly.
better we all are. Yeah.
Exactly. So a couple questions I want to ask you. Challenges or mistakes over the last couple years running your business. Can you think of some major ones?
Yeah, I can think of a lot. A lot. So I think, gosh, where do I want to start? So I think the first thing that I did that I would definitely not necessarily recommend is really not thinking through the business model, and in really thinking about how to structure the company in a way that service not just the client's needs, but actually my own as well. And I know that sounds really silly, right? Like it sounds like, well, of course, like why wouldn't you think about yourself? But when you're starting a business and you're trying to get, those early clients, oftentimes you're willing to do just about anything to, to get the client. And what I realized over the course of time was that I had set up the business in such a way that was not sustainable for me energy wise and mentally and things like that, but also in a way that was actually undervaluing the value of the service I brought to the table. And so I think like the biggest mistake I made was just like really undervaluing myself, undervaluing the service, not thinking through the business model. And I learned that lesson pretty hard in terms of, I got to a certain point where I looked back and I realized I could have been charging a whole lot more for the same things that I was doing. And really the client was getting the best deal here and I wasn't. So there was a couple mistakes I think around the business model that I wouldn't repeat. I think also growing the team with just freelancers and subcontractors is tricky because I did have a moment, while I was in the midst of going through a personal divorce and also, a lot of stress inside of the business, dealing with this business model that was like kind of broken. I had one of my subcontractors leave, literally no notice, one day just up and disappeared. He was struggling with his own things as well. So, I couldn't fault him for it, obviously, but it left me in a bit of a situation while I was already juggling all these balls. So I think the lesson I learned there is that sometimes even though a quick fix may be to just like subcontract something out or freelance, get a freelancer or hire an agency or get someone on Upwork or whatever the case might be, that there is still value in having some people who come in-house where they're a bit more dedicated, they're a bit more, there for you and the company and the purpose and things like that. So that, and then just the self-care piece, obviously getting to that point of burnout where I was literally at a crossroads of do I stay on planet Earth or not, is not a great place to be in. And I think when I look back, I can see all of the decisions that I had made that led me there. And really, I didn't have to get to that point. Like when I think back, I realized that had I talked to someone earlier, had I opened up, had I made different decisions, had I had a mentor to kind of guide me through, maybe I wouldn't have ended up where I got to, and maybe the severity wouldn't have been as bad. I don't know. Obviously, I can only think back and sort of hypothesize, but yeah, I think those, and not hiring an accountant sooner. that one was a very tough, lesson to learn. Yeah. So
Yeah,
that would have been a big one.
those are all really good normal mistakes an entrepreneur goes through, right? Not pricing, understanding your
Yes.
value,
Yeah.
understanding why you're running a business, right? Like it
Yes.
should serve your lifestyle, not to
Yeah.
please
Yes.
someone else, right?
Yeah.
And then I found like owning your staff, which is full-time employees, is the number one goal because of
Yeah.
loyalty. The
Yes.
dedication, their output, what is
Yeah.
expected and their time as well as their performance, right? um,
Hmm.
and then you actually want them to get better, right?
Yeah.
as a
Yes.
sub as a subcontractor, it's like you're doing a piecework, right? You're just
Yes.
doing the job. But as an employee, they're dedicated, so you are forced to want to help them get better
Hmm.
as humans, not just as a employee, right? Like where do they want to
Yeah.
go in terms
Yeah.
of their goals and vision, right? So
Yeah.
I've gone through all of that and I pivoted away from subcontracts to full time. I know
Yeah.
lifestyle is key. Like all these things, you just have to come to a realization, right?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
all these mistakes are normal, I feel, for business owners. In terms of the advices, I know some of them were some of the biggest challenges and mistakes you made.
Mhm.
What pieces of advice would you give someone starting or someone's been in business for a couple years, from what you've learned over the last couple years?
Yeah, I think just finding a circle of peers that really really understand what you're going through and understand the business is so critical. I think Especially right now, especially in 2020, especially in a pandemic, especially given the state of the world, now is so important to get your tribe and really find that, kind of circle of people that you can deeply trust. We need connection more than ever. And so I think if I just had like one piece of advice, it would be seek out those groups early on. It could be a mentor group, it could be a peer group, it could be, whatever it looks like. It could even be people that you're just connecting with on Twitter or LinkedIn. Like, it doesn't even need to be formal, but if you can just find those people, I think that you will feel so much less alone. The other thing too is that, we live in a time in 2004, the internet was just sort of, figuring itself out. There wasn't even really like online courses yet. There wasn't social media wasn't a thing when I started my company. If people like that are listening to this can believe a world without social, it just wasn't there yet. And so, when I think back to that, we didn't have access to a lot of information. And if we did, we were reading like the E-Myth, by Michael Gerber, because it was like the only book that really existed on the subject. I'm exaggerating, but like I think we have access to so much information now that I think we also exist in a time when people can, you can educate yourself every single day through podcasts, videos, courses, everything. So I think find a mentor circle of some sort, and then just spend a bit of time every day trying to just educate yourself on entrepreneurship or business or people or culture or your particular skill set, like whatever it is. Just spend some time, because that investment into yourself is so key.
That's awesome to hear because, yeah, words of encouragement, educate yourself, find a community
Yeah.
that really resonates. And it doesn't even have to be an online community. It could be
No,
just your friends, peer groups,
absolutely.
relatives,
Yeah.
neighbors, right? People that you go to restaurants, coffee with, right? If you have sports activity, hobbies, church group, whatever it is, people
Anything.
that,
Yep.
anything, because like you mentioned, this is during the pandemic. People, you want real relationships, people that you
Yeah.
can trust, that you can open up to, because people are going through a lot right now. And
Yes.
if you can open up and share what really is going on, like behind the curtains, right? People are always putting up this nice facade from the neighborhood you're living in, the car you're driving, the clothes you're wearing. But people don't really realize how much debt you're in. What's
Yep.
going on behind the scenes? Are you happy at work? Is your relationship with your significant other in turmoil because of what's happening? Like all
Yeah.
these things is what behind the curtain is what I'm talking about, because people forget, right? It's like, why
Yeah.
are you in this earth? Why are you living if you're not living happy,
Mm-hmm.
doing something you love doing, and
100%.
creating
Yeah.
something of value, right? For people, like as an entrepreneur, that's what
Yeah.
you want, right?
Yeah, and you said something so key in there. You were talking about how, like people will look at other people and sort of view them as being more successful if they have the car or the house or the whatever. That's, I think, one of the best things that came out of me having a business through my entire 20s was that it really changed my definition of success, but it also changed my relationship to things. And what I mean by that is when you get into, the process of having your own company and you're doing this business thing, it's really easy when you first start making some great money to be like, "Oh, I can afford all the things and I'm going to go do all of that." But when you get into it further and you're doing it for more time and years are going on, sometimes you realize like, wow, okay, I'm getting these things and they're great, but they're not bringing me fulfillment or satisfaction or happiness or anything like that. And it was one of the greatest lessons for me through the process of owning that company in my 20s was that my relationship to things and success and stuff and everything else as I moved into my 30s completely shifted. And today, I don't care if I drive a Ford, Fusion, which is what I drive. I'm actually glad that I have the car I have, and I'm actually super glad that I don't have a really expensive car payment, and like I'm good with that, and it actually makes me happy, and I'm just happy if I'm financially comfortable. I don't need to be super rich to be happy because I have my family and I have close friends, and I've got work that makes me feel fulfilled. And I think for anyone listening to this that feels like they might be on the hamster wheel a little bit of chasing the next thing all the time, give yourself a little bit of a break. Give yourself the okayness with, as long as the things that you're doing make you feel good, and as long as your mental health is in check, and as long as you physically and emotionally feel great, the rest of it doesn't really matter. It really doesn't. Nobody cares. Which I know sounds so mean, but like, they just don't, they don't care.
It's because people put so much stress on themselves, and they
Yes.
feel like when they look the part, people will admire them more. So it's this whole social amplification, this like share mentality. But I mean, at least you're true to yourself, and you uncovered what that life purpose is, what meaning is, right? People forget, like, relationships, experiences are probably the most vital things in life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for you to uncover it in your 20s and now 30s versus when you're in your 50s or 60s, it's hard to get out of that gut, rut, right?
Yeah.
I was fortunate to work in corporate when I was in my 20s, and I saw people in different life stages, from 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60 even. Yeah. Some people were single, some that were married, some were ultra successful, driving nice cars, nice homes, whatever, some that were renting. And I just found it very fascinating, and being curious myself, to uncover, like, why do you still love doing what you do, right? Like, what drives them, what really motivates them? It's not for money, it's really for other meanings, to really satisfy others, right? Like, provide real true meaning or value. So when you have a family, that's your number one focus, right? Take care of your significant family, your immediate family. If you're single, it's maybe just for yourself, right? You like traveling, you like buying stuff, sure, right? But people go through these life stages, right? And it's just trying to figure that out. And people have to realize, like, life is a long journey, and it could be 80, 100 years, right?
Yes.
And depending on where you're at, you could be 20, you could be 40. It's never too late. You got to figure it out. And it's okay to work for someone if that's what your calling is and 100%. You truly enjoy it, right?
Yeah. And I just want to clarify too, because I feel I don't want this to get lost in the context. I don't think there's anything wrong though with like wanting things. I just want to make sure I'm really clear. Like, if you want the BMW in the driveway, like, amazing. That is so great. I think the only thing that I just want to get across is, like, if you're doing those things not for yourself, but actually for others, and you're doing those things because you think it's going to bring you fulfillment and satisfaction, I think that's the moment it gets a bit tricky. But if you're cool and you also have a nice car and you feel really fulfilled and you're happy and like all of those things are in check, like, amazing. That's so great. And I just want to make sure, like, everyone knows I'm not saying that wanting stuff or striving for things or going after things is the bad part. It's not the bad part. It's just the relationship you have to it.
Yeah, I think growing up, like when I was in my teens or finished school, I always wanted an A4 Audi. For some reason, I thought it was classy.
Mine
I was
like the TT. I wanted the Audi TT.
So I always wanted an Audi. I was like, I had it on a vision board. I was in sales. Every sale, I would put some money in, and I would eventually save. Eventually, I got it. I was like, that's it. Like,
exactly. Yeah.
It took me years to figure that out, but it was like a sense of accomplishment. So it was more fulfilling for me to actually have that vision. And then it was more travel. Then I was like, look, I really want to go to Asia. So I'm going to save. And, but that was really memorable. And I still cherish those memories. So now I'm like, stuff versus experiences.
Yes.
So
same. Honestly, you and I have almost the exact same journey, because mine was the TT. And then the only reason I didn't get the TT was because I went into the dealership and the person that was in the dealership refused to serve me because I was so young. And I remember he was just like, no, you can't test drive any of these cars. Like, and I was just shocked, right? So I turned around and walked out, and I went down to the BMW dealership down the road, and they ended up getting a BMW 128i. Same thing though. The only reason I did it was because I set my
Yeah.
vision on that, and I was like, I'm gonna go do it, and I'm gonna get the car. But it did nothing. Like once I had it, I was like, oh, okay,
I'm not
cool.
as cool as I thought it would be, right?
No, like it doesn't really change who I am as a person.
Yeah.
The only thing that was nice was like it definitely had some kick going down the highway,
Exactly what you're
right?
driving. Oh yeah.
That's
But
it.
that's about it. But it was fun. Like you
Yeah,
put together
yeah,
goals, you have
yeah,
like, something to strive for, right? And you
yeah.
accomplish it. And that's what
My
you need,
yeah.
right? Goal
My goals
setting.
today are so not sexy though. My goals today are like, I just want this much money in my retirement my retirement savings. Like it's different now. It's not sexy.
Especially when you're a parent, right? So
Oh,
your,
yes.
focus is a little bit different. You have different values,
Yeah.
different, reasons why you're living, right? You're supporting someone that, they rely on you, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I have to pay for that college education somehow. So better
exactly.
start saving now.
Exactly. So a couple of last questions.
Sure.
What drives you today? What motivates you?
Oh,
In terms of the purpose, because things have changed. You're no
yeah.
longer wanting to be that entrepreneur. Maybe that will come back to you. You
Yeah.
never know, right?
I mean, it definitely might. And what's interesting is like I still find myself being entrepreneurial in other endeavors. So, one of the things that I'm really fascinated with right now is we do a lot of hiking and adventure style things,
Nice.
climbing,
Nice.
the whole thing. And so we started, my family and we started a YouTube channel and a TikTok and an
Nice.
Instagram specifically for that. So I get a lot of meaning out of and this is not just true for the side project that I have, it's also true with my work, but I get a lot of meaning out of sharing specific experiences with people or being able to influence their life in a positive way. And I know that that sounds a little bit like, um like a little loose in its definition, but what I mean by that is like when I think about, for example, Trails Next Door, which is this adventure site, uh, I get the most fulfillment when someone messages me after seeing a trail we posted about or an experience we shared and they go do it and then they message me and they're like, I did that and it was incredible, like I loved it, thank you so much. That literally makes my whole entire day, week, etc. And at Fellow, when we get an email from a customer that's like, that webinar that you did, that Twitter chat, the podcast episode, whatever it might be, really helped me solve this management problem that I was dealing with or made my meeting better, I get so much fulfillment out of that. So for me now, it's less about, I find it's less about myself and more about, am I able to influence other people's lives or their work in a meaningful way? And if I can, that is where I get like if I was to get enjoyment out of anything, it's that feeling of helping
That's
someone else out.
that's awesome. So you're creating value, something that is making an impact. And I feel like a lot of people who are business owners, I get it whenever I get a review, a testimonial case study, and
Yeah.
it's very positive, or
Yeah.
people recommend or refer
Yep.
me business. I know I'm doing something right. And I
Yes.
feel like that is so rewarding. It's like the purpose. Why am I doing it? It's not only to get them good results, but
Yeah.
honestly, they're so proud and happy with the work that they're going to recommend, they're going to
Yes.
refer. And
Yep.
that's where you're in a good space. You're doing something positive and your momentum is good, right?
Yeah.
In the up and up. So I love you sharing that because, everyone has side projects and it
Yeah.
doesn't
Yep.
have to be business oriented. It could be
No.
volunteer. It could be community. It could be
Yep.
just helping others, right?
Yep.
It's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, exactly. Trails Next Door, like not monetized, not anything. Although it's funny, I'm learning TikTok through it, so it's a great thing from the marketing side to flex a new muscle. Having a lot of fun with that. Yeah.
Well, and that's why I started this podcast too, right? Like 2 years ago, I just wanted to put out content. I just wanted
Yeah.
to help other business owners. And I'm finding that I'm having more fun meeting new business owners, meeting people, having good conversations and relationships with them
Yeah.
to then uncover some gaps that I have, as well as share some insights that they may find valuable as well. So it's just
Yeah.
fun, right? And
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be for money. You just do it because you want to, and
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah. And in fact, some of those projects are probably the most successful projects, right? When they're not led by the dollars, but rather by the passion, the heart, the enthusiasm. So I love it. I'm glad you're doing the podcast. It's great.
And then last question.
Yeah.
Aside from where you work at Fellow, what are some of the other major pillars that really, really mold you today and have really,
Yeah.
guided you throughout these many years?
That's a good question. I think for me, I've definitely, because of the experiences that I've had around, mental health and burnout and depression, like I get a lot of value out of sharing that experience and that journey with others. When I was working at the Startup Accelerator just before coming to Fellow, we started this campaign, and I call it a campaign, but like that feels like it cheapens it. So it wasn't a campaign on purpose. It was an initiative where we did these mental health events for founders. And we called them LSpark Unplugged. The accelerator's name was LSpark. So we called them LSpark Unplugged. And the idea was really just to get founders together to have those moments where they could talk more openly, connect as people. And we did things like hiking or rock
Nice.
climbing or, things like that. So I think mental health and the intersection of mental health and entrepreneurship has always been one of the pillars that I've been drawn toward. So I think that's been really important. I think I do a lot of teaching today as well. So I teach at the university here in Ottawa. I teach at the college as well from time to time. I sit on a board there as well as the chair, and those things are important to me because I want to be able to share the experiences and the things that I've learned over the course of time with the younger generations, right? The people that are just coming into their careers. So I get a lot of value out of teaching, and I always have. I've been teaching for 20 years. So I love that. Yeah, I think those two things have been really big. And then I'm also a video gamer, and that's like
Nice.
a lesser known fact. Oh, no, it's not lesser known. I'm lying. Everyone knows that I like video games. However, I will say what's neat about being in a space like that is, it's something completely different than the rest of the things that I do. But it also has been a fantastic community building piece for me as well. I've met some of my closest friends gaming, and it teaches you things like problem solving and creativity, and it really does, right? Like it's actually fascinating, and it's just a great way to let off steam too. So
That's awesome.
um, yeah, I think those things would be parts of the pillars.
I used to be a poker player. I used to play a
Oh
lot
yeah,
online games, StarCraft, Red Alert, and all those, uh,
yeah,
Warcraft. It's just a part of me that a lot of people don't
yeah.
see, right? Because that's like my leisure time.
Yeah. Well, you should, you know what though? Share it. I just posted last night on Twitter. I tweeted out my KDR from a Call of Duty match, and I
Oh, nice.
completely beasted.
That's awesome.
So share it. People want to know all facets of who you are as a person.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So, Erin, how do some of the people listening get a hold of you, reach out to you, connect with you?
Yeah, so I would definitely say, of course, check out Fellow. It's Fellow.app is the website. And then for me personally, I'm on every social platform, including TikTok. But mostly I hang out on Twitter and LinkedIn, also on Instagram. But the easiest way is to just Google my name. If you Google my name, everything will pop up. And I share quite a bit on the entrepreneurial journey that I've had through like my blog on Medium or my blog on my website. So again, all free, all accessible. So go check it out.
Amazing. Well, thanks a lot for sharing
Yeah,
this journey
no, it's
with
been
me.
great.
It's been a lot of fun. And again, if all the listeners, any of the listeners want to reach out, definitely check out Erin. Reach out to her. She's been an amazing guest today. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much.